What's up everybody on YouTube? AJ Russ back to discuss another video, and today we're going to be talking about the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 6. Yes sir, Week 6. The season is already starting to move really fast, and I will say about this week, there weren't nearly as many as good of games as there were in Week 5. There were some good matchups, but we are starting to see some of the teams separate themselves, and we're starting to have a general idea of what teams are true contenders. And not to say that some teams are just out for the count, because a lot of people can turn around their seasons. We've seen that in seasons past, but we're starting to see some of the teams that are pretenders and some teams that are looking forward to the draft for sure. Talking about some games real quick, the Lions killed the Cowboys, absolutely destroyed them in their crib, in their trap. Absolutely embarrassing as a Cowboys fan. There's just a lot of questions there. The Saints-Bucs game, that game was really close in the first half, but in the second half, the Buccaneers, they had huge separation and won the game 51-27. We'll talk about that more later, but I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Buccaneers in terms of how serious they should be taken as a contender in the NFC, because they shouldn't be slept on at all. At the matchup between the Ravens and the Commanders, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, the Ravens have now won 4 straight. They're starting to look like the Ravens that we thought that we would see after they started off 0-2 and last year making it to the AFC Championship game. Certainly one of the best teams in the league. The Packers blew out the Cardinals. Jordan Love hitting his stride after he came back from missing those games. Starting to look really good. Also have to, of course, talk about the Thursday night football game. The 49ers beating the Seahawks. They were dominating them. The game got a little bit closer, but they still won. Even without all their key players, Jordan Mason getting hurt a little bit, they still look solid. They play against the Cowboys in a couple weeks. That's going to be an interesting game. And they also play the Chiefs in Week 7. A Super Bowl rematch as well. That should be good. Houston Texans are now 5-1. Like I said in previous weeks too, they are one of the best teams in the AFC, and they still haven't played their best ball yet. So there's just a lot of different teams to talk about. Can't wait to break them down. It's Week 6, almost Week 7. So we're starting to, like I said a few minutes ago, get into a general idea of what teams are, but there's still a lot of football to be played as well too. So with that being said, guys, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. You know what we post about here: videos about the NBA, NFL, Marvel, DC, pop culture, cooking videos, shorts, reels, things of that nature. And with that being said, let's talk about NFL Week 6. This Thursday night football matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks, I thought it was going to be better in terms of these two teams being divisional rivals. The Seahawks have been playing good football, but before this game, they dropped 2 straight, and of course, they ultimately lost to the 49ers as the 49ers won in this game 36-24, making the Seahawks 3-3, and now the Niners also 3-3 as well. But I thought it was going to be better because at halftime and going into the third quarter, it was 23-3, a 20-point lead. It was like, oh, it feels like one of these Thursday night games again. And then when the Seahawks had that kick return touchdown, it was like, ooh, this might be an interesting game. And it was for a little while, but there was just a clear disconnect between Geno Smith, between the whole offense. DK Metcalf was frustrated at times, and like Kirk Herbstreit said during the game, Geno Smith is kind of a streaky quarterback. Definitely has his highs and his lows. Seahawks talked about how they wanted to have a more balanced offensive game, passing less and being able to focus on the running game, and that still didn't happen because they were playing catch up. Geno Smith threw 52 times, completed 30 out of those passes for 312 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. Didn't really establish anything on the running game, and trust me, I know, because I have Kenneth Walker in fantasy. Yes, he had a touchdown, but he had 14 carries for 32 rushing yards. And then Zach Charbonnet had 5 carries for 20 rushing yards. You had no running game against the 49ers defense, which is one of the better defenses in the league. Of course, having Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, and other pieces. But man, it was tough for them. And I'm not surprised. I thought the Seahawks had a chance going into this game because the 49ers have been up and down. But now it seems like really that Cardinals game that the 49ers blew in Week 5, it might have woke them up. And they play against the Chiefs in Week 7. We know they're going to be playing for some redemption in that game. Losing to them in the Super Bowl obviously last year, but also in 2020. So they're going to be up for that matchup. And they had a good game offensively. Brock Purdy completed 18 out of his 28 passing attempts, had 255 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Really efficient football. Deebo Samuel had 3 receptions for 102 receiving yards and a touchdown with that long 76-yard reception against the Seahawks defense that broke down the 49ers. They'll certainly still be one of the best teams in the NFC. Still to be determined on when Christian McCaffrey will come back. George Kittle also had 2 touchdowns in this game, but you still can't count them out. They're still one of the best rosters in professional football. It's just about them putting things together and when they get healthy, but it's a good dub for the 49ers. We had another early morning game in London between the Chicago Bears and the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Bears blew out the Jaguars, winning 35-16. The Jaguars now have a 1-5 record. Now the Bears in that NFC North, which is by far the best division in the NFL right now, they are 4-2. It's a really good game. I think it was the best game that Caleb Williams has played so far in his young rookie career. Completed 23 out of his 29 passing attempts, had 226 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, only 1 interception. They played really efficient football. Overall, DeAndre Swift had 91 rushing yards on 17 carries for a touchdown. Cole Kmet had 5 receptions on 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Keenan Allen also had 2 touchdowns. It was just really a good game for the Bears offensively and defensively. They made Trevor Lawrence and company that offense be stagnant, and it's just really looking bad for the Jaguars right now. How hot do we think Doug Peterson's seat is in Jacksonville? Because he is a good coach, but my thing is they have the personnel, they have the players. Offensively, they have a good amount of weapons. They They have Tank Bigsby. They have Travis Etienne Jr. I know that he deals with injuries a lot, but they have him. They have Christian Kirk. They have Evan Ingram. They have the rookie Brian Thomas Jr. And of course, Trevor Lawrence. How much do you need? Trevor Lawrence, he is a good quarterback, but I will say he misses a lot of reads at times too. So it's really frustrating seeing a number one pick like that who just got paid too in the offseason have a season like this so far, which seems like it's lost because in that division, the Texans are going to run away with it. Let's be real. The Colts are the second best team in that division too. So if anyone makes a wild card from that division, it would likely be them. But there's still question marks there. So you're the worst team and you have the Titans in your division. That's saying a lot. For the Bears, it just looked really good. A lot of people were super rough on Caleb Williams for his start, but it just takes time for some quarterbacks, and we have to realize that he was drafted number one for a reason. So they'll certainly contend potentially for a wild card spot in the NFC. We'll see how the rest of their schedule goes because it gets tough as they play against their divisional opponents because like I said, the NFC North right now is for sure the best division in football with the Vikings who are undefeated, the Lions who have only lost one game, and the Packers who are also 4-2 like the Chicago Bears as well. So it is a good win for Chicago, I will say. We'll see how things go for them, and for Jacksonville, it is looking super bad for them, and that might be an understatement. Now this game in my opinion was very bizarre because it was close in the first half and even going into the third quarter, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers scored 20 points in the fourth quarter and they ended up beating the New Orleans Saints 51-27. Like I said in the intro, people have to start taking the Buccaneers serious. They have Baker Mayfield, who has really revitalized himself in Tampa Bay. In my opinion, he's a top 10 to 12 quarterback certainly this year already, how he's been playing, and he played really good in this game. It was a little up and down for sure because he had 3 picks. They were playing a really aggressive football, but it ended up paying dividends because they won by 24 points. He completed 24 out of his 36 passing attempts for 325 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and those 3 interceptions that I mentioned. And he had a little stinger that he took to the hip when he was scrambling on a drive, but he ended up finishing the game. And the Buccaneers, they're cooking right now. Chris Godwin, he had a really good game, had 11 receptions on 125 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns, balling. Sean Tucker for the Buccaneers had 14 carries for 136 rushing yards and a touchdown. Bucky Irving had 14 carries for 81 rushing yards and a touchdown. Just a really good offensive game for them overall. And genuinely, I'm not surprised. The Buccaneers made the divisional round last year and they continue to improve. They drafted well. Like I said, they drafted Bucky Irving, just added some more pieces offensively and defensively. Liam Cohen, their offensive coordinator in Tampa Bay, he looks really good, has a great rapport in terms of the play calling and being creative for the offense. He could end up being a candidate for some teams that end up letting go their coaches in this next offseason. We'll see about that. But the Buccaneers, they look really good and I'm excited for them because that's also my dad's favorite team. And as y'all know, I am a Cowboys fan, but if there's any other team I want to do well, it's the Bucs usually. So shout out to Baker, shout out to how they're playing. But for the Saints, man, after week 2, they were Super Bowl contenders for sure. They were cooking everybody. They cooked the Cowboys, how they cooked the Panthers, best offense in the league. But now it's looking tough. And I will say about Spencer Rattler, because he is starting, of course, Derek Carr got hurt in that Chiefs game on Monday Night Football. For what Spencer Rattler was asked to do, he did well, but like I said, in the fourth quarter, everything just really broke down. In the game, Spencer completed 22 out of his 40 passing attempts, had 243 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions in his first start. So it was tough as the team ended up collapsing, but they were playing really efficient football in the first half. Rashid Shaheed had a punt return for a touchdown. They were playing through Alvin Kamara, who had a touchdown, but not a lot of rushing yards. So after starting off 2-0, the Saints are now 2-4. That's tough. Reality really started to hit them quickly, but hey, at least they were Super Bowl contenders after 2 weeks. We will say that. That's a good reward for them. Nah, I'm playing. Let me stop trolling. I guess I'm just still mad about that Cowboys loss, and I'm gonna talk about that later for sure. Don't get me started. But, and trust me, I'm gonna talk about how they got blew out this week too. But for the Buccaneers, like I said, they have to be taken seriously for sure in the NFC because how they are playing lights out football. You can make the argument that they should have won that game against the Atlanta Falcons and that they should be 5-1, but they didn't. But they're 4-2 right now and they're playing really good football. A lot of people had this game as game of the weekend, rightfully so because of how it finished as well. The Washington Commanders against the Baltimore Ravens, and the Ravens won the game 30-23. But as you can see by the final score, it was close. It wasn't a runaway game, and these two teams right now are certainly contenders in their respective conferences and in their divisions, leading both of their divisions in the NFC East for the Commanders and the AFC North for the Baltimore Ravens. And Jaden Daniels, he continues to play really good football. They did lose a game, but he had a really good game individually. Completed 24 out of his 35 passing attempts, had 269 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 22 rushing yards as well. A really solid all-around game for him and the Commanders, and they continue to show that they are an improved team under Dan Quinn. But for the Ravens, I felt like this was a game that they were going to win. If they lost it, it would be a game that they had gave up, but they played good. Lamar Jackson completed 20 out of his 26 passing attempts, had 323 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 interception. He also had 40 rushing yards too. Derrick Henry, he was a really big difference in this game, had 24 carries on 132 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Continues to just be great and one of the best running backs in the league despite being 30 years old. His nutrition and how he takes care of his body is paying dividends, and how he continues to be a high level player in this league. And the Ravens, one of the best teams in the AFC, one of the best teams in the league, period. They continue to show that. Zay Flowers also had a huge explosive game, had 9 receptions on 132 receiving yards. Rashad Bateman also had 71 receiving yards Jaguars, and Mark Andrews finally got his first touchdown of the year on 3 receptions for 66 receiving yards. I noted it like that because he's on my fantasy team and he hasn't done really anything. I know he had a car accident in August, so cut his slack for that, and he had that injury last year too. But that's a good sign for Ravens fans for sure, as they do have Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, a two-headed monster at that tight end position. So the Ravens, they continue to look really good. The Commanders, even though they lost, they still look really good right now, and these certainly are 2 teams that we could potentially see in the playoffs. I'm sure about that for the Ravens perspective. For the Commanders, we will see, as long as they keep it up and Jaden Daniels continues to play at the level that he does. He should win Offensive Rookie of the Year, but only time will tell. For me, it's kind of perplexing that some people weren't high on the Green Bay Packers this year, and I'm not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl or make the Super Bowl or even make the NFC Championship game, but we saw last year how good they can be and how good Jordan Love can be too. And I think he's finally getting his rhythm back. He played an up and down game against the Rams in week 5. They won the game, but he made some boneheaded decisions in that game. But in this game against the Cardinals, Green Bay dominated and Jordan Love cooked. He completed 22 out of his 32 passing attempts, had 258 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. Just a really good game offensively and defensively for the Packers. Christian Watson had 3 receptions on 68 receiving yards and a touchdown. Romeo Doubs also had 2 receiving touchdowns. Josh Jacobs had 62 rushing yards. Just the team overall dominated the game in all fashions of the football, offensively and defensively. And statistically, Kyler Murray, he didn't have a bad game for the Cardinals. Completed 22 out of his 32 passing attempts, had 214 passing yards and a touchdown. Just the team was overmatched. Green Bay was able to play really efficient and complementary football, which helped their defense get some rest, and the offense just exploded every time they were on the field mostly. So it was a good win for Green Bay. They are in that tough NFC North with the Lions, the Vikings, and the Bears. But we can certainly, I think, see 3 teams make the playoffs out of that division. That wouldn't be surprising because we saw in 2022 with the NFC East as the Eagles, Cowboys, and the Giants made the playoffs. So we could see the same thing this year in the NFC. It really just depends on the other teams in the other divisions in the NFC. But the Packers, they have one of the best young rosters in the league, and they're going to continue to certainly get better throughout the season, especially with Jordan Love returning. But it's a good dub for them. And for the Cardinals, I've continued to say it every game, they're going to be a competitive team, but they still don't have enough this year. But that's not to say next year that they can't potentially contend for a wild card and in the playoffs, because they have a really good culture and foundation, especially under head coach Jonathan Gannon, but they're still some ways away. The Indianapolis Colts beat the Tennessee Titans, winning 20-17. And in this game, Joe Flacco made another start and played really efficient football, even despite being 39 years old. I think besides Tom Brady, in terms of being one of those older quarterbacks, he's the second best old quarterback that we've seen, because he just steps into an offense and just gets things going. Completed 22 out of his 38 passing attempts, had 189 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. And let me go back to that statement I said about the old quarterback thing. I'm obviously not saying that he's near Tom Brady level. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, like, in terms of being an old quarterback, playing really good and efficient football at that age, he's been one of the best that we've seen in terms of being an old quarterback. And yes, over Aaron Rodgers, because I know how the Jets are and their expectations and things of that nature, but Aaron Rodgers has not played nearly as good as Joe Flacco this year, and I don't think that that's a bold take or a hot take at all. But continuing on this game between the Colts and the Titans, are we surprised about the Titans? Bro, every single week, I swear, Will Levis gives us some type of meme-worthy moment, and he had a bad game. There's no other way to say it. Completed 16 out of his 27 passing attempts and had 95 passing yards, a touchdown and an interception. And I will say, the Titans, they only lost by 3, but what do you really expect if you're a Titans fan in Tennessee? They're not even really the definition of mediocrity, in my opinion. They're just the definition of unwatchable at times, because it's just kind of cringe. They now have a 1-4 record. Tony Pollard had 93 rushing yards and a touchdown. I do miss him on the Cowboys, not gonna lie, but this is one of the teams every single week I look forward to talking about quickly. The Colts, though, there's certainly more hope there. They now have a 500 record. They're 3-3, and we'll continue to see how long it'll be until Anthony Richardson returns. Wouldn't be surprised if he returns in week 7 and how things go. Like I talked about the AFC South a second ago with the Texans being at the top of the division. We'll talk about their game soon. The Colts, they are behind them. They have a really good roster offensively. They have some solid pieces defensively, but I still think that their defense needs a lot of work, and that might be the thing that ends up holding them back against contenders and better teams in the AFC. But when you have a backup as Joe Flacco, you're going to be good. Anthony Richardson is continuing to get better. He just needs to stay on the field. That's really the main thing with him, and just making sure that he plays efficient football in terms of out the pocket, because we know how athletic Anthony Richardson is. But teams are going to try to make him a passer and be a pocket passer at times, especially the better teams in the AFC. So we'll see about that. But the Colts, it's a good win for them. Speaking of the Houston Texans, they had a really dominant win over the New England Patriots, winning 41-21. I believe this is their first win over the Patriots in Foxborough. Not really surprised at all. They scored in their first 2 possessions, and we saw where things were starting to go, and it was a blowout. The Patriots and Drake May, he started to get things going in the second half a little bit, but we all knew that the Texans were likely going to win. And I'll talk about the Patriots first real quick before the Texans. Despite those 2 interceptions, I will say Drake May had a solid first start, and a lot of people were skeptical on him starting at all this year. Even if it was later in the season, we saw that it didn't take too long for him to start. In the Patriots, they now have a 1-5 record, so we already see that they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league, potentially in the Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty sweepstakes. We will see. But Drake May had a good game, completed 23 out of his 33 passing attempts, 243 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and those 2 interceptions that I did mention. But he had good moments. He had 38 rushing yards as well too. We saw the potential of how dynamic he can be as a thrower and on the run, scrambling at times when he needs to. We saw that at North Carolina as well in college too. The main thing with him was just getting the fundamentals right and some of his mechanics. And over the preseason, we saw how solid he was then, and during training camp and things of that nature, we saw some of his improvements. So it's a good sign for Patriots fans that you potentially have your quarterback of the future, but they still need a lot, and they need a lot of weapons as well too to add on to that. I will say though, Demario Douglas had a good game, had 6 receptions for 92 receiving yards and a touchdown. Keyshawn Boots had 59 receiving yards and a touchdown as well, and also Hunter Henry had a touchdown too. So they play solid, but the Texans, they're one of the best teams in the league, period. We expect them to make a deep run in the playoffs, potentially in the AFC Championship game or even a Super Bowl. Only time will tell. But CJ Stroud, he had a solid game, completed 20 out of his 31 passing attempts, had 192 passing yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Yes, he had under 200 passing yards, but that's really all they needed to do. Joe Mixon returning this game after missing the previous 3 from that ankle injury, and he balled out, had 13 carries for 102 rushing yards and a touchdown. Mixon also had 30 receiving yards too. And despite Nico Collins being out for these 4 weeks, they still have a lot of talent around CJ Stroud as well too. Tank Dell had 7 receptions for 57 receiving yards and a touchdown. Stephon Diggs had 6 receptions for 77 receiving yards and a touchdown as well too. So this Texans team, they're certainly one of the best teams in the league. I'm from the Houston area. I'm not a Texans fan, but this is the best that I've seen them, at least early in the season, in a while. I remember them winning the AFC South for the first time in 2011, and then those Deshaun Watson and JJ Watt teams in the late 2010s. But this team feels a little bit different because of the culture that DeMeco Ryans has established there in Houston, offensively and defensively. Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, Jalen Petrie, Derek Stingley. There's just so many weapons that they have offensively, defensively, that makes it feel like this Texans team is a true contender and can potentially win it all at some point. Now this game we're not going to spend too much time on, especially about the Browns at this point. The Browns are who they are. Yes, they have a great defense, but offensively they can't do anything. Like, we just know what it is with Deshaun Watson. I hate to say it like this, but they're probably going to end up cutting him and taking that huge $86 million salary cap hit, because you don't want to be hamstrung at all anymore by this incompetent quarterback play. I just hate to see how bad he's playing, but regardless of that, the Eagles won this game against the Browns, winning 20-16. And about the Eagles too, yes, they won the game, but if you're an Eagles fan, you shouldn't really be feeling that great about that. You only beat the Browns by 4 points. You saw Nick Sirianni yapping to the fans after they were saying fire Sirianni. I will never say that someone should be fired, but he hasn't been the greatest coach for sure. Yes, they made the Super Bowl a couple years ago, but there's been a clear disconnect with him and Jalen Hurts at times too. And if there's a disconnect between him and the fans, I mean, you don't want to be on your fans' wrong side. So that's the wrong thing to do in my opinion. But regardless of that, the Eagles, they look solid. AJ Brown and Devontae Smith returned in this game, and they both played really well. Both of them had huge explosive touchdowns, and AJ Brown had a great performance overall, had 6 receptions on 116 receiving yards and a touchdown. Devontae Smith had 3 receptions and 64 receiving yards and that touchdown that I talked about as well too. Running wise, they weren't really able to get things going with Saquon Barkley only having 47 rushing yards in the game, but Jalen Hurts had a pretty solid stat line, completing 16 out of his 25 passing attempts, had 264 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. So it's a win that the Eagles certainly should have had, because if they would have lost that, a lot of people would definitely be saying fire Sirianni. But for the Browns, man, we're not going to talk about them too long. It's just a sad situation with what's going on, because it seems like that defense is getting wasted. I've heard things about potentially should the Browns try to trade Myles Garrett, different players like that, to try to get some value. That would be ridiculous in my opinion. He's one of the best edge rushers in the league. I think that if possible, you try to find your quarterback next year, whether it's in free agency or somewhere in the draft, because it's bad. This Deshaun Watson that we're seeing now, it's crazy the difference between him in 2020, 2019, and those seasons, and the Deshaun Watson that we're seeing in 2024. It's just terrible. But yeah, the Eagles won this game. There was a little scare in this game between the Chargers and the Broncos when Jim Harbaugh left the sideline, but thank God he was able to come back, and the Chargers ended up winning the game 23-16 over the Denver Broncos. And the Chargers now have a 3-2 record, and the Broncos are now even at 500, having a 3-3 record. For the Chargers, after the bye week, they played really well. Justin Herbert, dealing with that lingering injury, still played some solid football in this game, completed 21 out of his 34 passing attempts, had 237 passing yards and a touchdown. J.K. Dobbins continues to play really good football, had a lot of carries, 25 carries on 96 rushing yards, but had a touchdown too. Really revitalizing himself after those catastrophic injuries that he's had, Achilles wise and with his ACL. So shout out to J.K. Dobbins for that. Receiving wise, Kamani Vital had a receiving touchdown for the Chargers, but nothing too crazy from the core overall. Shout out to Simi Fehoko, who used to be on the Cowboys, had 2 receptions for 44 receiving yards, but besides that, it wasn't a crazy game at the passing game for the Chargers, but they were able to just control both facets of the game. And for the Broncos, Pat Surtain left the game with a concussion, hoping that he's able to be okay as soon as possible, because he's one of the best defensive players players in the league, and definitely I would say the best player on the Broncos. So that's a huge blow to them. And the Broncos, like I said, even at 500 right now, and I think the biggest reason why is because of their defense. And offensively, I mean, Bo Nix had a good stat line of 19 completed passes out of his 33 passing attempts for 216 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. But in this division, in the AFC West, we know it's the Chiefs. It's just really that simple. It's the Chiefs' division to lose. And the Chargers, they'll probably end up being second, but I still don't think that they'll make the playoffs. Could be wrong about that. We'll see as time goes. But I'm not surprised by this outcome and how things went. The Chargers well rested after a bye week. And the Broncos, who have been solid at times, are still streaky offensively and still lost this game. This game, we're not going to spend too much time on. The Steelers made quick work of the Las Vegas Raiders, winning 32-13. And talking about the Raiders real quick before I talk about the Steelers, this is for sure going to be one of them years where y'all are bad. Hopefully they can finally get their quarterback though in the 2025 draft. I talked about on the previous video and the biggest takeaways from week 5 that Mark Davis was talking to Shadur Sanders at an event. So maybe they'll end up drafting him. I don't know, but there's just not an answer for how bad the Raiders are in my opinion. And with the Raiders trading Devontae Adams, their season is cooked. We already know what time it is. Beautiful city though. Fun city though for sure. But talking about the Steelers, they had a good bounce back win after losing to the Cowboys in week 5. Justin Fields, he had a solid game. Not really too crazy passing wise, but rushing wise, he had 59 rushing yards on 11 carries for 2 touchdowns at 145 passing yards. And this game really was a testament to Najee Harris. I guess he heard those things about the Pittsburgh Steelers not having a running game because he had 14 carries for 106 rushing yards and a touchdown. Looked really good. They just were able to control the game, especially with that defense dominating with TJ Watt, Hayward, and other players of that nature. It's just bad for the Raiders because defensively you're missing Christian Wilkins. Yes, you have Max Crosby, but they can only do so much. But it's a good win for Pittsburgh for sure. This right here is 2 out of 3 blowouts that I'm about to talk about. The Atlanta Falcons dominating the Carolina Panthers 38-20, both in the same division in NFC South. I was really surprised by this result though. And it really seems like obviously after these 6 weeks that it seems like the NFC South is going to come down between the Falcons and the Buccaneers. And like I predicted before the season, I still think that the Buccaneers will win, but we'll see because the Falcons will have something to say about that. They won that game in week 5 against them on Thursday Night Football, and they won this one. Kirk Cousins completed 19 out of his 30 passing attempts, had 225 passing yards and a touchdown. Tyler Algier on the running game had a dominant game, and so did Bijan Robinson. Algier had 18 carries on 105 rushing yards and a touchdown. Bijan Robinson had 15 carries on 95 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. So they were really efficient at the run game. Drake London also had 6 receptions for 74 receiving yards and a touchdown. Kyle Pitts had 3 receptions on 70 receiving yards. Just a really good game for the Falcons offensively and defensively. They forced Andy Dalton to throw 2 interceptions. I mean, we know what it is with the Panthers. They're going to be one of the worst teams in the league. They have Chuba Hubbard who had 92 rushing yards, so that's a good game for him. They have players like Deontay Johnson who had 78 receiving yards on 6 receptions and a touchdown, and Xavier Legette who had a touchdown too as a rookie. So they have a couple of weapons, but for the Panthers, bro, we know what it is. And I hate it for Bryce Young. It seems like the best thing potentially for him will be to get out of there at some point. This is a lost season. Andy Dalton has had his moments, but we know that he is a certified backup in the league, and he's not even a backup on Joe Flacco's level, so we don't really take that too seriously. But in this game, it's a good win for the Falcons, a game that they should have won. If they would have lost, it would have been concerning. And like I said, the NFC South is going to come down between the Falcons and the Buccaneers. I'm not going to lie to y'all. It's going to be hard for me to talk about this game objectively, but I will because I am a sports analyst. I'm also going to, talk about it as a Cowboys fan too because it's what it is. The Lions, we already know what they did. They pummeled the Cowboys, winning 47-9 in Dallas on Jerry Jones' birthday. The ultimate birthday gift to Jerry Jones, who has done absolutely nothing the past 28 years in terms of being a general manager. Obviously, right now, the fan in me is speaking out, but right now, I'll talk as a journalist, as an analyst, and then I'll talk about it as a fan perspective. In this game, just everything was so easy for the Detroit Lions. We know that they're an explosive offense, and Jared Goff coming off of a bye week and a game against the Seahawks in week 4 where he completed 18 out of his 18 passing attempts. He just continued to play that efficient football again against the Cowboys defense, which can't stop anything, by the way. Completed 18 out of his 25 passing attempts, had 315 passing yards and 3 touchdowns, killed the Cowboys. He's had a surgical game. But then on the running game, really this is any team that goes against the Cowboys. Just run the ball because you know they can't stop it. David Montgomery, 12 carries for 80 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs, 63 rushing yards. And then, of course, the explosive plays were back-breaking too. Tim Patrick, once he had that reception in the first quarter against the Cowboys defense, I already knew what time it was. They were about to start feasting on them. But Jameson Williams had 3 receptions for 76 receiving yards and a touchdown. Shoot, their best receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he really didn't have to do anything. He had a touchdown, but he only had 37 receiving yards. Sam Laporta had that huge 52 receiving yards touchdown. They just killed the Cowboys, and like I said, everything looked easy. And the Cowboys are now winless at home after being 16-0 at home in the 2022 and 2023 seasons. And they've allowed 167 points in the past 4 home games that Dallas has had. That is pitiful. So I'm about to talk about the Cowboys a little bit. It's gonna be hard, I'm not gonna lie, but it was hard to watch as a fan, and just hard to watch in general as a fan of football. Dak, what are you doing? Oh my gosh. That first drive, I mean, I wanted them to score a touchdown for sure as a fan, and they ended up kicking a field goal, which is frustrating. It's a testament to how awful of a red zone offense that they have and how archaic of a playbook that they have as well too. They are so one-dimensional. They don't have a running game because Jerry Jones is incompetent and won't sign a running back of Derrick Henry's caliber who literally wanted to be there. Won't even contact, bro. Insane. I will never get over that. I promise you I won't. It's just bad. And now that Ezekiel Elliott was whining about his lack of carries, you give him more carries and he has a whopping 17 rushing yards. Oh my gosh. Like, bro, come on now. And Rico Dowdle, who had his best game of his career in that Pittsburgh Steelers game, you lessen his carries. He only has 5 carries for 25 rushing yards. It's bad. I'm telling you, it's bad as a Cowboys fan. It's bad in general. It's just hard football to watch. And Jerry Jones, he has really handicapped this team. And I'm glad they lost like this on his birthday because it shows of how detrimental you have been to your franchise. How can you expect the fan base to get behind this? It's just bad football. It's average football. As a Cowboys fan, I want them to certainly just enter the Ashton Genty sweepstakes. This bye week is well needed because in week 7, I'll at least be able to be happy for a Sunday and watch football without having an emotional roller coaster, because then in week 8, they play against the San Francisco 49ers. Yay, the team that you definitely couldn't beat in the playoffs. So it's just bad as a Cowboys fan. You couldn't even score a touchdown. Couldn't even score double digits. 9 points. I'm just looking at these stats right now, and that 9 is just glaring in my face. It is so bad. Like, man, I feel bad for my fellow Cowboys fans. It's bad, and it's not going to get better anytime soon. And one thing I have to say, guys, like, just y'all being NFL fans, you know, listening, watching these videos, I appreciate it. But bro, everything for the Cowboys, like, they just can't lose normally. Everything is embarrassing. Green Bay, embarrassing. How they lost to the 49ers in both of the playoffs games. That Zeke snap, and then they couldn't get the ball off at home against the 49ers in the 2021-22 season. That was embarrassing. Green Bay, embarrassing. You just can't make this stuff up. It's bad. The last normal playoff loss they had was against the Rams in the 2018-19 season. That was respectable, of course. The Rams made the Super Bowl that year too, lost, but they still made it. But it's just bad, guys. So I need y'all to pray for me. But nah, seriously, I'm not gonna let it like affect anything. But it's just bad to root for. It's hard to root for. I'm still a Cowboys fan, but I've never been a delusional one. I knew that this team was going to be worse than the team that they had last year, and for me, what's the point of them making the playoffs? To lose again in the first round? I'm just in purgatory right now, and it's hard being a fan. And to add to that, people might want to mention the injuries and things of that nature. Yes, they had a lot of injuries offensively and defensively. Micah Parsons, DeMarcus Lawrence, Brandon Cooks, Eric Kendricks. I know all the people who didn't play. Deron Bland, he'll be back in the 49ers game. I'm not trying to hear any of that. A lot of these things is just down to straight effort, especially defensively, but I will say about the offense, when Dak is throwing red zone interceptions when you're driving down the field, that's backbreaking to your defense, and they have to continue to get on the field. You're not playing complimentary football at all. So that's what it is. Mike McCarthy, like I said, I don't like talking about people being fired, if they should be fired or not, but we've seen the same thing for him for 5 years now, especially with these 3 seasons before this year being 12-5. It's the same thing. So what are you going to change, Jerry? And if I have to answer that question, which it really is rhetorical, it's going to be nothing. He's the same owner, 82 years old now, thinks he knows everything, is so prideful, and is the reason why the Cowboys haven't won a Super Bowl since the 95 season. It is a good win for the Lions though, but long term it does suck. First of all, prayers for Aiden Hutchinson. He got his surgery on a broken tibia and fibula. That was a bad injury to watch for sure. He was having a potential defensive player of the year campaign type of season, was going off, leading the league in sacks this year. So prayers up to him for sure. For this game between the Bengals and the Giants on Sunday night, I'm not going to spend too much time on, obviously, because the score was only 17-7. Yes, the Bengals won, and now both of these teams have 2-4 records. Nothing too crazy there. We have high expectations usually for the Bengals, but at this point, you have a 2-4 record. Yes, you can probably creep your way into the playoff window, but how likely is that with that suspect defense? It's very unlikely. I don't know. We will see. We have Joe Burrow. He had that impressive rushing touchdown that we typically don't see in his legs usually, having that type of scramble ability, but that was impressive against the Giants defense. For the game, he had 208 passing yards, completed 19 out of his 28 passing attempts. Nothing too crazy there. T. Higgins had a solid game, 7 receptions for 77 receiving yards, and Jamar Chase had 72 receiving yards, 5 receptions. Not really too much to take away from this game. The Giants are the same old Giants. Brian Daboll is a good coach, but ultimately the inevitable will happen in 2025 with them making a quarterback change. Daniel Jones, he's played okay football. They did have that win against the Seahawks in week 5, but it's still just not enough ultimately. And when you lose your best player in Saquon Barkley, when the team is dealing with an injured Malik Neighbors, who is by far the best player on the team right now, and he's a rookie, you're just not going to get a high level of football being played, but it's a good dub for the Bengals. Last but not least, of course, we have the matchup on Monday Night Football between the Buffalo Bills and the Jets. And before talking about this game in particular, both of these teams made moves the day after the game. Obviously, the Bills won the game 23-20. But first, the Jets finally traded for Davante Adams. That'll be a good weapon for them. But in my opinion, I still don't think that they're going to be contenders. They should certainly make the playoffs. But I still think the Bills are going to win the division. And you saw that in this game. They still are the better team. But then the Bills, they traded a 3rd round pick and a 7th round pick for Amari Cooper from the Cleveland Browns. First of all, I'm so sure that Amari Cooper is happy to be out of that Cleveland and Deshaun Watson situation, because man, it was bad. Going from there to playing with Josh Allen, I'm sure that's going to be really good for him. The Bills have a number 1 wide receiver again. Of course, all that time between Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. Now they have Amari Cooper, who I think will certainly be utilized well. The Bills do run the ball a lot, and they didn't have James Cook in this game against the Jets, but they still were very productive on the running game. Ray Davis, a rookie, had 97 rushing yards, played really good. Ty Johnson also had 34 rushing yards. So this Amari Cooper addition will only help the Bills going further. And really in the Josh Allen era, I think this is the worst they're going to look, and that's saying a lot because I still think that they're going to win a division. But for the Jets, getting Davante Adams certainly is huge. Having Aaron Rodgers have his weapon that was utilized well with him for all those years in Green Bay, that'll be good for them. But I still don't see it pushing the pendulum too much. They could be a wild card playoff team, but after that, I don't think that they'll win the AFC East still. I could be wrong. This could really put a huge jolt into that team, but only time will tell. But it's a good win for the Bills. They're in pole position right now, number 1 in the AFC East right now with a 4-2 record. The Jets have the inverse record being 2-4, so we will see if this Davante Adams addition will spark a fire into them, because they play against the Steelers in week 7 Sunday Night Football, so that'll be an intriguing matchup. We'll see if he plays, but yeah, it's a good win for the Bills, and we'll see what happens for the Jets going into the rest of the season. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much it for the biggest takeaways from NFL Week 6. Let me know what y'all favorite matchup was from this week of games, and the biggest storylines, that trade between the Jets and the Raiders, and then obviously the trade between the Bills and the Cleveland Browns. We'll definitely tell about for those 2 contending teams. We will see what happens. But yeah, let me know y'all biggest takeaways. I appreciate you guys watching. Always make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at SwaggyRuss, and also on TikTok at SwaggyRuss02 for cooking videos, shorts, reels, content, things of that nature. More videos on the way, guys. You are loved. You have purpose. God loves you. Jesus loves you. Hope you are doing well. Thank y'all for watching always, and y'all have a good one.